ICE in the spotlight, the injustice system in America. New Fed Reserve Chair is pending. This is Dr. David D. Schein for Saving America with my own take on key stories from this past week focused on politics and business. Like usual, it's been a very busy week. ICE in the spotlight. Paid agitators and whack jobs continue to keep the focus on ICE cleanup operations in Minneapolis. Frankly, I think the key factor is that the scumball politicians in Minnesota are doing this on purpose to take some of the focus off the massive scandals that have been uncovered there. The idea here behind the ICE raids is to remove criminals who have committed rape, murder, and robbery. Why would any community refuse to turn them over to the feds? Further, why would any society release them into their own neighborhoods? Think about it, folks. So, predictably, another American has been shot dead in the protests. This is sad and shocking. Just as Renee Good shooting was avoidable, the shooting of Alex Preddy was avoidable. I will not comment on possible liability of the agents involved in the shootings. That is up to the justice system. The first shooting seems to have more justification than the second, but there is plenty of controversy to go around. Note that Preddy is being presented by some as the second coming, an ICU nurse at the VA hospital. However, a week before his death, he engaged in a violent ICE protest where he kicked out the taillight of an ICE vehicle and somehow sustained a broken rib that day. So a week later, he appears at another ICE protest with an automatic handgun with 2 extra mags. This is serious firepower. Look, anyone who engages with law enforcement while carrying a weapon is asking for trouble. It does not matter if this is ICE or the police. This controversy seems to center on whether he pulled or displayed the handgun and if he was completely disarmed before he was shot. The band of commie losers disguised as Dems are screaming to ban ICE from the field, impeach Kristi Noem, and prosecute anyone they can think of. You know what? None of that is going to happen. Parallel to this is passing budgets that will run until the end of the fiscal year on September 30th. The Dems, having lost their stupid record government shutdown in 2025, did make deals, but covered Homeland Security funding for only 2 weeks. The Dems and some GOP are calling for ICE reforms. I may surprise some of my regular audience by saying I like some of what is proposed. Nobody given a gun by the government should be any less than fully trained. There are allegations that some ICE officers were rushed into the field with inadequate training. If true, let's fix that. 2, no law enforcement official should be wearing a face mask. This is America, and we don't do things that way. So, you know what? I would agree to that. My compromise is that if some clown goes to the home of an ICE agent, that will be a criminal invasion of privacy. Let's say 30 days in jail and a $1,000 fine, and then second offense, 6 months in jail and a $10,000 fine. Every city and state capital needs to acknowledge that no jurisdiction in the United States can be a sanctuary jurisdiction. That violates federal law. Simple, all federal funds for any purpose will be suspended due to such foolishness. 4, we need Congress to do its job for a change and implement comprehensive immigration reform on a bipartisan basis. We do need the bodies in this country. Figure out how to make it work while arresting the convicted criminals and either executing them or deporting them who are less dangerous. 5, in turn, federal judges that refuse to follow law need to be impeached immediately for blocking ICE enforcement and arrest activities. No more Mr. Nice Guy. Speaking of failed federal judges, the injustice system in America. I was outraged this week when U.S. District Judge Margaret Garnett ruled that the death penalty is off the table for a federal prosecution of accused killer Luigi Mangione for the public execution of healthcare executive Brian Thompson. Naturally, Mangione is presumed innocent until proven guilty, but the evidence against him seems to be overwhelming. This was alleged to have been a stalking resulting in a murder, but then the worst he could get, if convicted, is life in prison without parole. I note that the Menendez brothers in California were recently classified from that no parole status and are working on getting parole. So that verdict does not mean much to me these days. Further, why should the taxpayers pay for as much as 50 years or more of room and board when this appears to be such a heinous act? Does anyone believe that such a person, if convicted, should ever be allowed to the general population? I encourage Americans to think about the victims, not the killers. In this case, you have a wife and two children who will never have the love and support of their father. For what? Best I can tell, an evil political stunt. Speaking of injustice, a guy in Houston, Texas area was the first Texas execution this year. You might say, hey, Dr. Dave, you got what you want. Nope, this fellow killed his ex-girlfriend and her subsequent boyfriend in 1998. Yes, that means he was alive for nearly 28 years longer than the two young adults he murdered. This is not justice. I want to see capital punishment reform in this country. I want to see persons convicted of such crimes put to death in less than 18 months. Time to get justice for the victims. No more endless appeals. Did the victims get 28 years to plead for their lives? I notice in all this extreme leftist talk about ICE, none of them mention the many innocent Americans killed, raped, and robbed by the evildoers. If it's time for America to focus on real victims, not the fake martyrs promoted by the left. New Fed Reserve Chair is pending. Most Americans have no idea what the Fed does and why they should care. The bottom line is that this little understood operation has an impact on the day-to-day lives of most Americans. The Fed is supposedly non-political. If you believe that, I have a bridge in New York that I'd like to sell you. The term of Fed Chair Jerome Powell is up in a few months. After much speculation, Trump has nominated Kevin Warsh to succeed Powell. What little is known about him is that in 2006, he was appointed to the Fed board. And at that time, he was the youngest person ever to be on the Fed board. Presently not on the board, he has been a visible critic of the current board actions. No, his arrival will not cause mortgage rates to drop immediately or suddenly that formerly $4 item that is now $6 will not drop back to $4. Too bad about that. What we have seen is that Powell was slow to move when inflation was surging, and now, according to Trump, he has not lowered the Fed rate fast enough to accommodate a growing economy. Mortgage rates are tied to many factors, not just the Fed rate. So what we need to do is be aware of the fact that the Fed rate has some impact on mortgages, but it's not going to be the big change that people are hoping for. Daily impact from the Fed is there, but may be hard to appreciate. The dollar is very low relative to other national currencies. This means that if you travel overseas, your dollar will buy less. That may not impact too many people, but suppose you buy one of the tens of thousands of items like car, computer, or TV that are made overseas or have foreign parts. Each component will take more American dollars to purchase due to the weaker dollar. Further, a Fed viewed as weak may cause uncertainty in the market. So gold and silver are at unrealistic record levels right now. Buying these metals is viewed as a search for stability. So keep your fingers crossed that things will get better with the new chair, but don't hold your breath at the same time. Business is not rosy in all quarters. Saks Global Enterprises, that also includes the famous brands Neiman Marcus and Bergdorf Goodman, has announced that most Saks off-Fifth outlets will be closing as part of a recent bankruptcy filing. About 50 stores will close with about a dozen left spread across 6 states. With my crew, the only Saks we have stopped at is the off-Fifth stores since we cannot afford the fancy department stores. This will impact a lot of middle-class Americans looking for some nice items for their wardrobe. Reports are that the $2.7 billion Neiman Marcus acquisition helped to push Saks into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. That is known as a reorganization, and often businesses reduce the size of their operation to attract new financing to emerge from Chapter 11. Communist New York City tries to ban Newsmax and taxis. Since I usually use a rideshare service, I rarely take taxis. Apparently, New York City taxis have TV screens and carry Newsmax. Not sure if they carry other networks. In any event, a buddy of the current commie mayor of New York City, Manhattan Borough President Brad Hoylman-Siegel, is trying to block Newsmax on the city's 9,000 taxis. He apparently has never heard of the First Amendment. Fortunately, there have been strong pushback against his stupid proposal. Not all reorganizations are tied to bankruptcy. In fact, Kroger, which is pretty healthy, even though the Albertsons merger did not go through, is making some big moves. They're closing 60 underperforming stores. At the same time, they'll be opening 14 new stores, which will likely be the big marketplace Krogers, like the couple that I patronize personally here in Houston. In a bit of a surprise, given Kroger's strong presence in the Houston market, a major marketplace store in a high-end part of Houston is now closed. I did not realize that Kroger did not have a retail presence in rapidly growing Florida. They have been providing on-demand services with robot warehouses. That is now being shut down, so Kroger will not have a presence in Florida. I assume this is due to entrenched competition already present in that big market. Panama ends China Canal port deal. In something that I thought had already been resolved, the Supreme Court of Panama just held that the contract with Hutchinson Port Holdings of Hong Kong to operate two ports along the Panama Canal was unconstitutional. Regardless of how this was obtained, it was critical that the CCP be blocked from this hemisphere. Hopefully, this will spread through the rest of the world where the CCP is trying to buy influence through its crooked business deals. Nurse fired for promoting dangerous conduct. We associate nurses with healing the sick. Most Americans have more contact with nurses than doctors. However, that is not a universal situation. In a horrendous story, a nurse, Melinda Cook, posted to her social media that other nurses should deliberately date ICE agents and then drug them with poison and spray them with other substances. She worked for a VCU health facility in Richmond, Virginia. On the positive side, it took less than 2 days for VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University, to fire her. Good for them. It does appear that the ICE derangement syndrome may be more toxic than the Trump derangement syndrome. Wild elephant rampages in India. In a story that's almost unimaginable in 2026, a wild male elephant in eastern India went on a 10-day rampage. I'm not sure why the rampage was not stopped at an earlier point. Reports are that 24 people were killed and 15 more were injured. I was curious about what was done to stop the elephant. Killing the elephant was apparently not an option. The last report was that the authorities still had not tranquilized it. Incredibly, as many as 500 people are killed by elephants in India each year. The expansion of human settlements into previously forested areas is one cause of this serious problem. I find this personally surprising after seeing many elephants in the wild on safaris in Africa several years ago. I observed a very purposeful, matriarchal society. They are great moms. The teenage males, on the other hand, are tossed out of the herd to go live on their own in a little bachelor group. And hopefully they'll get that situation resolved. And while I'm a big fan of elephants, certainly it's the symbol of the Republican Party, I also do not understand why, if you have an animal that is causing so much hurt and injury to humans, that it would not be put out of its misery. This is Dr. David D. Schein. Thanks for joining me for this special edition of Saving America. Remember, a new Saving America show is aired on the Brushwood Media Network every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Listen on any of the 16 network stations, Apple or Google mobile app, Apple CarPlay, TuneIn, Smart Speaker, and all smart TVs. Find more information at the brushwoodmedianetwork.com. Please be sure to join us each week. We welcome and love your feedback from our growing audience.